Let's get right to it. Great honor to have Governor Bush, Governor Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida, candidate for President of the United States. Governor, good morning. Thanks for coming.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing? Interesting out there, huh?
Yeah, it's wild and woolly. It's exciting, and people are engaged. People are deeply disturbed about the plight of our country for good reason, but I think ultimately, in the end of the day, they're going to want someone who can fix these things.
Yes, sir.
So I'm encouraged by each and every day's work.
Someone said to me the other day, well, it's America. It's always a surprise, right? So there's a
exactly.
Anyway, we'll get to some of the campaign stuff. I want to get to substance because for all the time I've known you, you're clearly a substantive person, substantive policy person. Let's talk about using the event you're going to in New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Education Summit. You have a very interesting and conservative record in education, a record of accomplishment in Florida. What are you going to be talking about in the summit in New Hampshire? And I have a follow-up about a broader issue of yours. Go ahead.
Well, I think I'm going to talk about the Florida record, the need for state-driven reforms to improve rising student achievement, and the role the federal government can play to be a catalyst for more reform, because that's what we need. If you assume that every child can learn, which I do, a lot of people in America seem not to, but if you believe that, and I know you do, then it's up to us to organize ourselves around these kids to make sure that they do. And right now, about a third of our kids are college and or career ready, after we spend more per student than any country in the world other than a couple of small countries. So this is a national challenge. It needs to be solved locally, and state policymakers need to step it up.
Right. You talk about the right to rise. One of the things I worry about in America, and I think conservatives should address it, you address it to your credit, is the whole question of mobility. And if you look at the numbers over the last 30, 40 years, and I know you have, if you're born in the bottom quarter of American society, that possibility of upward mobility is less than it used to be. The numbers are there. Now, it's a combination of forces. It has to do with family, it has to do with neighborhood crime, education, and so on. But what do we do about that? How do we make the right to rise the ability to rise?
Well, social and economic mobility is driven, the studies that I've seen, driven by three things: strong families, communities that are alive, not dying, and making sure kids graduate college or career ready. If you can do those three things, a child will be able to live a life of purpose and meaning, to a much higher probability. And the thing that policymakers could focus on first and foremost is education.
Right.
And the amazing part is there's great success in islands of success
yes.
around seas of mediocrity. And we ought to find out why it is that we have these extraordinarily successful examples of how kids have lived successful lives because they've gotten a quality education. And I don't excuse away the failure that exists all around them.
Yeah, I remember when I visited schools, I was in 120 schools when I was secretary. We went to schools that were successful against the odds. And I remember I was even criticized, why don't you go to failing schools? I said, well, because I want to celebrate the succeeding schools, the ones that are succeeding despite the odds.
That's exactly what we need to be doing across the policy spectrum, in my mind, is there are great success stories. Why wouldn't we hold these up as examples of how it can be, tear down the barriers so more and more success happens, and have no tolerance for the mediocrity? We shouldn't just excuse away, particularly in the low-income communities of our country, we can't excuse away why kids aren't learning. We don't have the luxury of doing that.
You're a conservative. I always used to say not every teacher is a parent, but every parent's a teacher. You mentioned family. What, as a conservative, can government do to strengthen the family to increase the odds for the kids we're talking about?
Well, I mean, you're the expert on this. This is a real challenge because it's very hard for government to intervene across the board. But I think one of the things that we can do is to change our whole social welfare system so that people that are to get intact families can receive some benefits. The highest marginal tax rate, in effect, for Americans are people in poverty trying to get out, and so adjusting our transfer payments would be the one thing that I think government could do. And then, secondly, as a kissing cousin of education, we have the most antiquated job training programs in the world as well. We should modify those bring them into the 21st century, and give people. There's a huge skills gap in our country. Men particularly are becoming marginalized, and one way to keep strong families is to validate the importance of men in society, which means that there needs to be better work opportunities for them, which means they need skills.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on. I just know in the last year or two, the most depressing things I've heard is a poll pointing out that a majority of young Americans think the American dream is dead. I mean, if there's one thing about America, it's that dream. We cannot let that one die. We cannot let that one die.
Exactly.
Let's go on to veterans. I don't know if you know the group, but we've spent the last 3 days talking to a group called Vets Against the Deal. It's a group of veterans who are against the Iran deal. We talked to a dad yesterday who lost his son, but they're implacably opposed to the Iranian deal since given the nature of Iran. But if you have any comments about that, we'd love to hear them. But you've got a plan for vets too, in terms of the Veterans Administration hospitals, correct?
I do. The deal is a bad one for a lot of reasons, but I'm sure the veterans that have talked to you expressed their opposition because the Iranians have blood on their hands.
Yep.
And nothing in this agreement has anything to do with their incursion into their support of radical Shia militias in Iraq, nor anything to do with their being the largest sponsor of terrorism in the region. So there's a lot of good reasons to oppose the deal, and I hope Congress does that. As it relates to the veterans, we're asking people to make this sacrifice, their families, and they come home, and the VA is operating as though it's in the 1960s. It's antiquated. It's huge, 330,000 employees. But there's lots of reforms that can be brought to bear. And if you give me just 2 minutes to go through some of them.
Sure.
Veterans ought to be able to choose their doctor.
Sure.
A tiny fraction have the right to choose their doctor now. That should be expanded. We should have more focus, and I know they're making efforts to begin this, on women's veteran services. That as the military force changes, the unique needs of women as they come home need to be taken care of. VA pharmacies ought to be able to fill prescriptions for outside doctors. This is a simple thing to do that would make it easier. We need to modernize the VA. The information technology systems are ridiculous. You can't get a scheduled appointment online like many other places and healthcare facilities across the country. You would think that a country as great as ours, with the resources we have, would be able to do that, but we don't. You can't fire VA employees. We've had these atrocious situations where people are getting bonuses for people getting off of waiting lists but not getting care. People have died. Vets have died because of this.
Yeah.
There needs to be much more flexibility to do that. There's a whole array of things that we can do to show our support for veterans, and it doesn't require additional money. We've increased spending on the whole system exponentially in the last 7 years, and the results haven't gotten better.
Let me ask you this, awkward transition. Sorry, but we just have you for a little time. Birthright citizenship, I have a feeling we're going to be debating this. Not to be tedious about campaign questions and Trump and all, but campaigns have to make decisions. You got Trump out there. He seems to be leading the pack, blocking the sun for a lot of issues and discussion. You've decided to engage here on this, for example, on this issue of birthright citizenship. How come, and will we expect to see more of that from you, not ignoring the Trump challenges but taking them on?
Yeah, I mean, look, Mr. Trump has made a proposal, 6 pages of suggestions on immigration. I applaud him for having more specific ideas. I think these ideas are practical. I've written a book about this. I have clear plans on how to enforce the border, practical plans that won't shut down our relationship with our third largest trading partner. A trading partner, by the way, that we export more to than import.
Yeah.
He wants to, in fact, have trade sanctions against our third largest trading partner. There's more concrete ways to deal with the legitimate concern that our border is not secure, and I'll continue to talk about those. As it relates to birthright citizenship, this is protected. This is a right of the 14th Amendment, and I just don't think it's legitimate to say that we're going to change our Constitution and that's going to solve our problem. I don't think that that's the proper thing to do.
Governor
If
Bush,
there's fraud or if there's abuse, if people are bringing,
sure,
pregnant women are coming in to have babies simply because they can do it, then there ought to be greater enforcement. That's legitimate, side of this. Greater enforcement so that you don't have these, anchor babies, as they're described, coming into the country.
Thank you, sir. We got to let you go. If you ever have 40 minutes, we'll just do policy and substance, promise, and we'll look for you up in New Hampshire. Thank you very much, Governor Bush.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.